So I think conservation is one of those terms that means a lot of different things to different people, but to me it means being respectful of and protecting as much as possible nature. And nature might be wildlands, the middle of the Amazon basin, or it might be a vacant lot in the middle of Salt Lake City. Because there are plants and animals and microbes and soil organisms that live everywhere. And I think that what humans, some of the work of humans that is the most important work that we can do is making sure that nature, especially parts of nature that cannot speak or act for themselves, like trees or earthworms or soil microbes or ants, that we take care of them, just as we take care of our children or take care of our pets, that we take care of nature because, first of all, it's just the right thing to do, but secondly, because nature gives us gifts, oxygen, goods and services, food, spiritual symbols. All of those things are gifts from nature. Not that nature is designed to give us gifts, it's just that nature and humans are inextricably tied together. And if you're tied to something, you want to make sure that all parts of that stay healthy. I think that, when we think about, are you a conservationist, what comes to mind is someone who's planting trees or someone who's donating money to the Nature Conservancy to buy up land to protect it. But I think conservation can be done in many, many ways. Conservation can be done by recycling a piece of paper. That's conservation. By separating your trash out and recycling. That's conservation. Scientists can contribute by taxonomy, by naming species, by understanding the intricacies of how does a tree work, how do its roots work, how does an animal manage its habitat. So I think all scientists are conservationists in that they're helping us understand and better help nature. Some scientists like myself take a more active role, that we advocate for conservation, or we try to inspire people to be more careful about the wilderness, or to remind them of how important nature is to us. And so many scientists do that, and I think that's great. But I think that not all scientists have to have that activist voice. I think that many scientists can also make their contributions by simply increasing our understanding of nature, and that's really important too. I think the tactic that I have come to use for conservation is being humble about science. I mean, for me, science is my way of knowing, my way of coming to understand the world, my way of respecting nature. But not all people have that, as their values. Some people have different values. Some people have recreational values. That's what they love. They love going to a football game. Some people have aesthetic or artistic values. They love looking at a piece of art. Some people have religious values. They go to church every Sunday, and that's what's very important to them. And what I realized pretty early on in my conservation work is that if I try to shove my scientific values down the throats of people who don't have those scientific values, I'm not going to get anywhere, right? It's like if someone says, I'm a Christian, and so I'm going to shove my Christian values down your throat. I'll say, hey, I'm a Hindu Jew. I don't really believe that, so why should I listen to you and your beliefs? So my tactic has been to say, and truly respect other people's values, but then to bring nature into those. So if, for instance, a religious person says, when I open the Bible and I see that there's the tree of life, that's very important to the people who read the Bible, I can say, tree of life. Well, I value trees because of their ecology. They give oxygen to us. They provide habitat for birds. There are ecological values, biological values of trees. That's what I believe. But you believe trees are valuable because God put the information about the tree of life in your holy scriptures. So maybe I should read your holy scriptures and learn about how your religion talks about trees. So I read the Bible. And I marked down every single verse that had anything to do with trees or forests. You know what I learned? There are 328 references to the words tree and forest in the Old Testament. And in the Book of Mormon, there's a whole chapter about this tree that has white fruits that people of faith walk to. It's just like the tree of life. And there's a rod that goes along to it, a pathway that people go to this amazing tree. And the tree is really a symbol of the love of God for the people who are of the Mormon faith. So I could go to the Bible or the Quran or the Talmud, the religious books of the Jews, or the Book of Mormon, and find all these references to trees and forests and how important they are to people. So I did that. I read all these books of the Holy Scriptures. I put together a sermon on trees and spirituality, and I started knocking on doors of churches and synagogues and temples saying, I would love to deliver a sermon, not about science, but about what I've learned from your Holy Scriptures. And I got welcomed in by ministers and rabbis and clergy people, and I stood up at the pulpit and I talked about what I learned about trees from religion. First, how do trees participate in the worlds of religion and spirituality? Second, how might awareness of this participation lead us to be better stewards of our trees? And I didn't try to say trees are important because of their role in oxygen or in sequestering carbon or any of the scientific stuff. Now that emerged later. If people were interested in that and they wanted to have a discussion after my sermon, I was more than happy to talk about that. But the approach I took was to say, what are your values and how can I fit my values into that? And so that's the way I've gone about engaging with artists. A lot of people care about modern dance or about poetry or creative writing or rap music. So I engaged a rap artist, for example, a guy named Caution, who had spent time in juvenile detention center. He had cornrows. He was really cool. And I brought him up a tree. I said, Caution, what do you think of this? And he said, this is pretty cool. I could make some rap music about this. And so I gathered up these 40 kids from Tacoma. They were at risk, what you call at-risk urban youth. We spent a week at my campus, which has lots of trees. Caution went out with me as the tree biologist. We spent the morning out in the forest. He would pick up a leaf or a branch and he'd just start rapping about that leaf.
How it like proceed from the forest to the city, hoping life succeed. I said there's more to explore than my eyes can see. Hidden worlds under the canopy that hide the key, and the things you never existed.
And then in the afternoons, we went into the sound studios and the kids made their own rap songs about what they had encountered. So it wasn't me who was trying to tell them about how important trees were. It was Caution, the rap artist, who was able to talk and sing and make this amazing spoken word poetry about what he felt about trees and branches and leaves when he encountered them. When you take that tactic of what you might call intellectual humility or just being humble and being willing to listen or to carry out the practices of people from other sectors of society, it doesn't mean you have to become that. Like, I still don't like rap music, and I'm still not a Christian. It means for the moment I can set aside my scientific way of being and say, I'm curious and I'm respectful of what you do. Let's play with that together for a while. Find this common ground, but still recognize that we have different likes and values and ways of knowing and being. And so it doesn't mean we're mixing everybody up and turning everybody into the same thing, which is impossible and actually quite boring. It allows this diversity of threads just to be woven together, but the threads still remain their integrity. It's like my mom and dad. My mom did not become a Hindu and my dad did not become a Jew. They made this kind of combination that allowed me to be this Hindu, Jew, and Nalini at the same time. And I think that's what, if we could all do that, or at least some of us could do that, I think that will make for a society and a world of bringing nature and people together, even if they don't all agree with everything at the same time. We have that in common. I was sitting in my lab one day, gosh, about 15 years ago, talking with my students and saying, how do we get little girls to be interested in trees? And I said, I thought, I used to climb trees when I was a kid, so I love trees. But not every little girl climbs trees or even likes climbing trees. So what do little girls like that would appeal to them? What do they like? So somebody said Barbie. Every little girl loves Barbie. Like even my own daughter, that I raised as daughter of two scientists. She wanted Barbies when she was 6 years old. So we said, Barbie, Barbie, Barbie. How could we make her sort of connect with trees? Treetop Barbie. How about a tree climbing Barbie? Of course. So I called up Mattel, which is the company that makes Barbies, and I offered them this idea of, if you make a treetop Barbie, we'll help you make a little pamphlet that goes along with it that has information about canopy plants. And you can have the idea, and probably a lot of people would buy this Barbie for their little girls that wouldn't buy a regular, icky, sort of floofy Barbie. Well, Mattel was not interested, and they said no. But we went ahead and made her anyway. We went and we bought these used Barbies from Deseret Industries and Goodwill stores. We took her clothes off. We had these volunteer seamstresses that made little field gear clothes, and we got little helmets on eBay, and we made these booklets that had information about treetop plants. And we started just selling, it was like selling them on my website. Like we sold maybe 400 of them in 10 years. It wasn't going anywhere, but we didn't care. It was just like the idea was good. Well, fast forward to last year, 2019, I got a call from National Geographic. It turned out that Mattel and National Geographic are partnering to make this new line of what they call Explorer Barbies. A wildlife scientist Barbie, an entomologist, insect studying Barbie, a nature photographer Barbie, an astrophysicist Barbie. And so they wanted me to be the advisor on it because this was my original idea. So I said, this is great, this is so great. So to thank me for that, they actually made this Nalini look-alike treetop Barbie. And so now I have this one-of-a-kind Barbie doll that looks like me, I mean like 30 years ago, but she does look like me, and she comes with a little booklet, and it's been really wonderful because I think this is not so much about my idea or even about Mattel. I think what it means that in the past 15 years, society has changed so that now there are a lot of young girls who are aspiring not just to be the Barbie that goes to a prom or catches a husband or hangs out at parties, but Barbies who are doing meaningful work, that are doing adventurous work, that are documenting nature and are making a difference in terms of the world and us in it through science. So when in my sort of travels of conservation, doing conservation the Nalini way, and having respect for other people, maybe people who don't have access to nature or who don't have the capacity to help nature, when you think about it, about our society, the people who are most far away from nature are people who are incarcerated, people in state prisons and county jails and juvenile detention centers. I mean, even if they want to help nature, they can't do it, and they are surrounded by where nature is not. So it seemed to me if there were one group of people I should be bringing nature to, it would be the incarcerated. And I started with this project in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, where I used to live. There's this ecological problem of people stripping mosses from branches and trunks of trees in primary forests for the horticulture trade, basically selling them to florists. And mosses take a very long time to grow back. So I thought, well, one way to combat this is to learn how to grow mosses so that people wouldn't have to strip them out of the wild, out of these rainforests. But nobody knows how to grow mosses, so I thought, well, who could help me learn how to grow mosses? And that's when it clicked. Why not go to prisoners, people who don't have access and would probably just love the opportunity and value the opportunity of interacting with real nature? And of course, mosses are very small and you can work with them with your hands. You don't need sharp tools or knives or anything to work with mosses. So it seemed like the perfect project. So I knocked on the door of a state prison that wasn't far from where I lived. The superintendent was very forward thinking. He said, well, it'll keep the guys busy, why not? So my students and I brought mosses to them. Over 18 months, they learned how to grow them. They took really good care of them. They watered them just right. We gave each of them a notebook and a pencil. They took great notes. I told them about the biology of mosses. For instance, mosses can dry down, like for years even, and then when you give them water and light again, they'll revive, which is pretty amazing. And anyway, after 18 months, the project was a total success. I had my knowledge of how to grow mosses. The superintendent was really happy because the guys were more peaceful. They were learning how to interact with each other, had better social interactions. And the men loved it because they were doing something useful. They were working with nature. They knew they were contributing to nature and to conservation. And one of them, a guy named Leo, said, during the course of this, said, could I have a little piece of moss to take back to my cell? And I said, well, it's fine with me, if it's okay with the officers. He said, yeah. And he took a little piece of moss, and he came back to me later and he said, I keep that moss in this little drawer in the desk near my bed in my cell, and every morning I look at it and it's still alive. And I know it's still alive. And I know if I just bring it out into the light and give it a little water, it's going to revive and grow again. And to him, I think, and to me, that was not just about the moss. It was about him, who had been in prison for a long time, in a drawer, shut up. But that he knew that he himself, when he was let out, and even when he was inside, he was reviving because he was doing something important, something that was connected to nature and something that was helping that rainforest out there survive better. And right here in Salt Lake Valley at the Decker Lake Detention Center, where 14 to 18-year-olds are incarcerated, they have been growing milkweed from seeds to plants for outplanting to help conserve the monarch butterfly. This butterfly, this beautiful orange butterfly, migrates all over North America down to Mexico and then back again. And the plants that they use for their food and their nesting, where they put their little eggs, is the milkweed. And so by planting out these milkweeds, these young men and women who are incarcerated in juvenile detention centers are contributing to the health and survival of our monarch butterflies. And that's a very powerful thing to be able to do for anybody, but especially if you're locked up in a place where you can't get out.